Alright, well, Gojo vs. Makima has happened, and to be honest, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Despite me having a different character that I would have liked to see Gojo fight instead, that doesn't mean I wasn't excited for this episode at all. Gojo, by all means, is a character that I really wanted to see featured on Death Battle, and while I'm not super interested in Chainsaw Man, seeing that series getting covered as well was also something to look forward to. Unfortunately, I do wish these analyses were created equal. While both go over their powers and stories relatively well, Gojo's rundown makes it blatantly obvious that they were trying to tiptoe around spoilers as much as possible, similarly to Tanjiro's back in season 9. It only really focused on the stuff established fully in the 2 seasons of Jujutsu Kaisen that are already out, which is fair. A lot of the stuff that was important to mention when breaking down Gojo seemed to be established in those seasons anyway. But even besides that, it just felt very limited and bare bones when it came to breaking the character down and going over his story. I mean, they do go over it decently enough, but not nearly to the extent that they did with Makima. Which I guess makes some sense because as of this moment, there's only one season of CHM, and none of Makima's bigger feats were in that season, so they kind of have to go over all the stuff in the manga in order to establish her appropriately. While I do appreciate them keeping Gojo's rundown mostly spoiler free for someone like me who hasn't caught up with the manga, it's still undeniable that it did feel like it impacted the rundown negatively in a way. I still did enjoy both of them though, and all the basics are there: good editing, good pacing, surprisingly good comedy. Both cutaways are really good. I love the implications of Wiz's comment about seeing God, and also the opening to Makima's rundown got a pretty good laugh out of me the first time I saw it. Like I said, these rundowns aren't bad by any means, but I think the real lack of meat on Gojo's really holds it back in my opinion from being a super great one. Alright, so now moving on to the fight, and 20 seconds in, I'm already loving it. The setting is perfect. Gojo is dispatched to deal with a high level curse, which just happens to be Makima while she's watching a movie, which that movie being Afro vs. Samurai Jack is such a good reference and it genuinely made me laugh. Also, speaking of other little Easter eggs before we move on to the main course, that being the rest of the episode, behind Makima in the movie theater happened to be some very familiar faces, that being Guts, Darth Vader, Alex Mercer, and the Chosen Undead, the losers of the previous episodes this season. I discovered that literally as I was writing this video, and the fact that they snuck that in is really clever and really funny. Alright, so on to the actual fight. They immediately get the characterization of both of these guys down perfectly. Makima's going one popcorn at a time while Gojo just shoves a whole handful of it into his mouth and is overall just acting like the most obnoxious person you can encounter in a movie theater, which I find incredibly in character and hilarious. I love the split shot between the two, with it slowly panning in on Makima's face as Gojo continues to talk, and then slyly drops that he's here to kill her. This immediately sets up one of my favorite parts about Gojo's character. What I love about Gojo is that he can flip-flop from this aloof, annoying goofball to this deadly serious and terrifying individual. It's a part of his character that really makes him so captivating and engaging to me, and I'm really glad that they nailed that part right off the bat. And it's all thanks to the incredible voice performance of Gianni Matragano, I believe that's how it's said. If that's not, I apologize. Who has been doing some voice work for Death Battle as far back as Season 2 with Lex Luthor vs. Iron Man. But nowadays, you probably know him from such masterpieces as...
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
Sup, bitch?
What the fuck?
My name is Melatonin.
You insignificant fuck! This is not...
And he knocked it out of the park, which to no one's surprise. I didn't even recognize him until I looked him up later, considering he has a pretty distinguishable voice that's pretty surprising. But he does a great job here, and gets a lot of the best lines in the fight, to no one's surprise. More notably towards the end, but we'll get to that. Makima's voice actor also does a great job. Kelsey Jaffer does a great job pulling off Makima's cold, calculative tone that the character's known for. She delivers all of her lines with this cold and malicious intent behind it, and even gets to get off some lines that lean more into the insane category, as well as a great death screen. Spoilers. Alright, let's move on to the voice actors and get to the fight itself, to which there's plenty to love. Gojo, as per usual, is the star of the show, as he is with any scene he's in, so it makes sense that he got all the best moments. He gets a lot of great character moments, like everything in the movie theater, the scene afterwards with him falling back with his arms behind his head, his little womp womp when Makima tries to hit him with a sword, which honestly, aside from the death, might be my favorite shot slash scene in the episode. It's so freaking good. It's delivered perfectly by Gianni, and the unamused look on Makima's face just adds to it so much. I love how casual and laid back he is throughout the fight. It's really representative of how he acts in most of his fights when he knows there's no real threat to him. Makima also has some pretty good moments, like her first line right out of the movie theater, her tombstone line, which was delivered with the perfect level of coldness and malice, and the following shot of her vanishing between the chain links was really cool and a really good visual shot. I also love how after she lands the first bang on Gojo, she starts to laugh, because in her mind, she thinks she's won at this point, so she starts to enjoy herself a bit more here now that she has a new pet to abuse, I guess. I also like the final, I guess, real line of her, the playing dead line. Of course, going back to the whole dog thing for her. Besides character moments, the animation is also really good in this episode. The sprite rigs seem a bit more stiff, especially compared to other episodes this season or even last season. But it didn't bother me too terribly much. All of the hand-drawn stuff looks amazing as per usual. Specifically, these two shots of Gojo were my favorites throughout the whole thing, as well as the shot of Gojo's leg regenerating, which was probably the most impressive piece of animation to me this episode. It also shouldn't be surprised the animation is this good this episode, because a lot of it was animated by Moro, who is the main guy behind the Indie Cross series, which, if you guys have seen that, know that there's no elaboration that needs to be done there. His work is amazing, and you guys should check him out. He's really good. In terms of choreography, it's basically exactly what most people expected this fight to be. It's basically just the unstoppable force meets the immovable object thing. The entire fight is just Makima just throwing all her different minions at Gojo, and Gojo just plowing through them like it's no problem, and Makima regenerating from any and all of his attacks. And honestly, if it weren't for the creative fight choices and the fun banter, I feel like this would have gotten boring pretty fast. But because they decided to implement a couple fun set pieces and sprinkle in some fun dialogue, it helps it from feeling too repetitive. Alright, now let's move on to the death. And it's a really good one, if I'm being honest. Probably in my top 5 this season. I'll have to wait for the entire season to come out, but right now it's in my top 5. Gojo continues to talk smack, as per usual, pulls Makima close with blue, and Makima fires off a bang. And I love how the music cuts off for just a split second when she says it. By the way, track's really great. I didn't really put that in the script anywhere, so I'm just going to say right now, track is really good. I also love this close-up shot of Gojo as he looks down at the wound. I swear I can hear him thinking, wait a minute, how'd that get there? His eyes slowly pan down. In my opinion, it was pretty funny. Makima starts firing off more bangs and starts laughing. And I also love how Gojo starts to laugh a bit as he's getting literally blasted. Literally getting his leg blown off and face planting into the floor, which I found a bit funnier than I probably should have, but I don't know. Makima gets a good line in that I already mentioned and summons what I believe to be the Angel Devil, and Gojo responds with an equally good line and pushes them all back with blue, heals his wounds, and activates domain expansion, which is really well done. It looks really pretty, and I like all the little Easter eggs they sneak in during this shot. And if you're thinking I'm going to show you all of them frame by frame, you're absolutely insane. I cannot be bothered to do that. I love the close-up shots of Makima as she's struggling to process everything happening all at once. And then, to close out the fight, Gojo repeats one of the rawest lines in anime history and disintegrates Makima completely with a hollow purple. Absolutely amazing way to go. If I did have one complaint, I kind of wish Gojo had some kind of line at the very end, because it just ends with him leaning against the wall silently as the camera pans out and he just doesn't say anything, which feels kind of weird for a Gojo win. I feel like he'd have at least one quippy thing to say at the end, but I don't know. I did like the report log at the end though, where it ends with saying that 1,012 humans were killed in the crossfire, which makes sense considering how many times Makima was blown to smithereens. And also one last thing, this shot of Gojo charging up the hollow purple, you see those holes in his jacket where you can see his skin? His skin flaps in the wind with his jacket, and now you can never unsee it. And that's Gojo vs. Makima. To be honest, this was one episode that basically completely met my expectations fully. Not in a bad way, but it did basically everything I expected them to do, which didn't really leave a lot to talk about, I guess. A lot of the other episodes this season either subverted or exceeded my expectations in some way, but this one just was exactly what I was expecting. Fun dialogue between the two, both of them just throwing a bunch of stuff at each other and the other just ignoring it, an unlimited void kill, and an Honored One reference. Again, this isn't meant to be a negative on this episode. All the things I mentioned that they do, they're done very well, but I just think it leads to it feeling, I don't know, lackluster. I don't think that's the right term. Lackluster doesn't feel right, but that's the closest thing I can really think of to describe how I felt about this episode. I think it's because besides the beginning and ending, there isn't like a lot of super hype stuff going on. Throughout other episodes this season, there's plenty of like hype moments going on throughout the course of the fight. But with this episode, it just feels like there were two spikes at the beginning and ending, and the middle is just like a consistent streak of just good. Hopefully that makes sense, and maybe my feelings toward this episode will make more sense as time goes on, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. I still love the episode. I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. It's really only a 9 because Gojo's rundown was really lacking a lot of stuff, but besides that, I don't really have a lot of complaints. Oh, right. And I also love that scene during the fight where the guy on the toilet explodes. I totally meant to talk about that earlier, but I couldn't find a good place to sneak it in during the script. It's really funny, and I like how it calls back to the joke during Makima's analysis. Okay, I think that's everything for the actual episode. Let's move on to the next time, in which, yeah, okay, I'll admit, this time I was caught off guard. Scooby-Doo versus Courage the Cowardly Dog? This was the last thing I expected to show up this season. I can't believe I was naive enough to predict Freddy Krueger versus Pennywise for the Halloween episode this year. That's crazy. I'm honestly really excited for this episode. Death Battle has had Toon Force characters on the show before, like The Mask or Popeye, but this is the first time they'll be doing two honest-to-God Toon Force characters against each other. And honestly, I can't wait. This has the potential to be an absolute comedic riot of an episode. I remember watching the cast episode from like a year ago or so, and I remember some of the stuff that both of them have, so I'm really looking forward to see what they cover and how they decide to handle this fight. I can already tell this is going to be a season highlight for a lot of people, and honestly, I couldn't be happier. Cannot wait for this episode. Alright, I think that's about it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Check out some of my other non-Death Battle videos, and I'll see y'all later.